Will Smith goes off the rails at the Oscars, and Zoe Kravitz was right. Protests for Valente Acosta Bustillos and demands grow for the DA to reopen his case where he was murdered by APD. Campaign to get the city council to take a stand against nuclear weapons. APS schools continue to be faced with danger at this time in South Valley schools, where they're placed on lockdown, resulting from two women shooting at cops while attempting a carjacking near the schools. Good morning, Albuquerque, and welcome to another episode of That Saturday Show, brought to you by the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, your voice and your advocate for social justice. The center needs your help, so please give. And please stop by our Peace Cafe, open every Thursday from 10 till 2. I'm Jim Harvey, your host, and today we have a riveting show for you where we will be talking about environmental justice, especially in Navajo country, but the issues are threatening to us all. Elaine Cimino and Elle Brown will be joining us to expose corruption in the face of health threats and threats to Mother Earth. We have a remarkable artist, Clifford Denier, back with us to talk about the human struggle that accompanies and helped to shape his artistry. And we'll be capping off the show with music by the Eyeliners. But here's a little more about our headlines today. Will Smith won a well-deserved Oscar for his latest performance, but the honor was overshadowed when he had to pretend to defend his poor wife's honor following a bad joke by Chris Rock. The brother got up on the stage and slapped Chris Rock, and when he sat down, began to yell profanity at Chris. Didn't need any of that behavior. So unnecessary and so professional. He's since apologized, but he could have taken a page from Ketanji Brown Jackson, who managed to maintain grace under some of the worst personal attacks during her Supreme Court nomination hearings by crazy racists and fascists like Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, and that dear little ass kisser-in-chief from South Carolina. Anyway, Brother Will did since apologize, but it wasn't necessary in the first place. His behavior just was not necessary. Stay tuned, because I believe that Will is still headed for some consequences. On the home front, a press conference was held earlier in the week in front of the district attorney's office to demand that the case of Valente Acosta Bustillos be reopened immediately. APD murdered this man, and his case has never been investigated. We need a good house cleaning APD, and the DA should not be allowed to let these cases go unresolved. Finally, let's give a shout out to Vets for Peace for taking the leadership in urging the city council here to take an official stand against nuclear weapons and nuclear waste. Somebody has got to put the government in check when it comes to violating international treaties and also putting the health and well-being of New Mexicans at risk. I just wonder how many people in our government here in New Mexico have investments in the kind of nuclear action that's happening that threatens us all. In line with this topic, let's hear from a couple of community leaders who have more to say. Good morning, everyone, and you are watching That Saturday Show. I'm Jim Harvey, your host, and today it seems like we are going to hit a topic that just leaves more questions than answers, but tells us all that there's a lot of work that we need to be doing. And that topic is, why does it seem that New Mexico continues to be the favorite dumping ground for trash, nuclear trash, mining of oil and gas to the point that it becomes an environmental disaster or a potential environmental disaster. Who are the people behind all of this? What, you know, what's happening here? What's the subterfuge that we see floating up to the surface along with the oil and the gas, and yes, possibly even helium? What does that mean for us all? What does that mean for our communities, and especially the Navajo community? What's happening there and why we need to take action? Joining us today is Elaine Cimino, who is the director of Common Ground Rising and a Pajola group member, I might add. And also Elle Brown, who is the director of Dooda No Helium. Dooda means no. And later we're going to have Elouise join us and tell us, you know, close to the ground, close to the community, what's happening and what that struggle is all about. But let's start with welcoming Elaine. Elaine, thank you so much for joining us on this critical and crucial topic.
Thank you, Jim, for having us. We are on unceded Tiwa land, and we work in conjunction with amplifying the message of our Native brothers and sisters, Indigenous brothers and sisters throughout New Mexico. And I was asked by Elle Brown to kind of look at some of these issues, and I put together a little PowerPoint. And so I'm just going to give you an overview of what's happening here, and I'm going to share my screen now. And so you have to enable my screen share. No, you shared your screen. I need to be able.
I'm sharing my. Don't want to share my screen. All you'll get is a picture of me. Let's see here. All right. Let's see. Cancel that. Screen sharing. Yeah.
You have to enable participant screen share.
Right. Okay, keep going while I'm doing that.
Okay.
Elaine.
So what we have here is the idea of helium extraction came forward in an environmental assessment where several community chapters, San Osti, Gray Hills, Toajali, Technopause chapter were slated to have over 218 wells drilled. And in the Red Valley area a few years ago, which is over the other side of Beautiful Mountain, they started stripping wells that had already had a lot of oil and gas extraction, and they started going for helium. And various environmental justice groups throughout the reservation, like Dine Care, other environmental groups like Earthworks and the Western Environmental Law Center, they came together to try to figure out what the threats to air quality, health, and land use issues were. Now, helium is a noble gas, and that includes helium, neon, argon, krypton, and radon. And so radon is also a gas that comes from radioactive decay like helium does. And so if radon is inhaled, then you can get, it's very toxic. And as it concentrates, if they take it out of the ground, for instance, in how they mine it, is they drill their hole and they put all these acids down into the ground. And one of those acids is napalm. And when that comes up with all this water, it goes into evaporation ponds or into banker tanks, and they haul it off and they inject it into wells somewhere. But they can also, workers can inhale this, and surrounding communities can inhale this. And so it's very toxic. The issue comes in is to whether, as the EA that they did for these for this project, is whether they're going to do oil and gas drilling as well. And they opened the door for that. And so it's unclear to a lot of people what exactly they're going to do, because they still have to do a lot of permitting, which should happen prior to doing any drilling. And so we're asking at this point for an environmental impact statement instead of the EAs that were stamped no significant impact.
Who stamped those?
Yes. So did we get the share on yet?
I thought we did.
Okay, I can do it. Yay.
Okay, you got it now, right?
Yeah, here we go. Oh, you see it?
Got it. Oh, yeah.
All right. So I want to show you some of the areas here just briefly. All of this is the Sanos T north and south area where they plan to drill something like 86 wells in there. There's 22 down in the south area that they're going to drill. In the two Gray Hills area in Totajali. And this is a lot of areas that's open to grazing and farming. And there's going to be a lot of truck traffic going through, raising a lot of dust. And if you know anything about the truck traffic that has to do with extraction, it stirs up a lot of dust. And if there's a lot of particles in that dust, this causes a serious situation for air emissions. So this is the beautiful mountain area, which is a very sacred place for the indigenous Navajo in the area. And so this has not really been developed. And now they're slating this for development. There's an existing pipeline that came off of Red Valley that kind of goes through the north up here. And so that is of critical interest too. Even in the northern part, I want to share a map back here. This map was I got from the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mines. And it's a new database that came out. A lot of people aren't familiar with it, but the yellowish ones show where the helium is. And the turquoise up here is where the coal is. And this is all kind of former mining operations in here. This area really has not been mined yet. And so this is what they're targeting. And so I just want to go back to the upper portion of that map where you see most of the community lives down here, and there's about 15 wells surrounding Teknopah's chapter, and it's really going to impact the schools and chapter house and homes in this area. And so we have a really significant impact. And those impacts are going to be from air, from fracking, from the waste, from the drilling, drinking water that can be polluted from a surface. So as all these spills happen, it gets into the aquifer from percolation. Or it could happen if the cement casing that goes through the aquifer cracks. Gas is known to penetrate the aquifers. And so there's all different types of issues, and some of these issues have serious health impacts. And we have gone through a lot of it in a previous PowerPoint, but as you know, T-norm and radium-226 and 228, they have a half-life of 1,600 years.
Right.
And there really hasn't been the studies on how this radon is going to impact the community as well. So the problem has been, there's been a lot of lack of response from the different agencies. There hasn't been adequate notice. There hasn't been a lot of transparencies that Elouise could talk about a little bit more on this issue. I wanted to get to the issues of environmental justice issues that are really important here.
And with that, Elaine, there's one question that jumped out for me when you were talking about it, extracting the stuff from these ponds and injecting it into wells. What kind of wells would they be injecting this waste into?
They have a special injection well, and they have stated in the EA that they will be putting injection wells in these areas, or they also have the ability to haul this off and put it into an injection well site. It's all very nebulous in the EA as to how they're going to deal with this. And, you know, this is coming up for a approval on April 18th. And there are a lot of environmental justice issues. And it really comes down to cumulative impacts. What that is. As you know, the Chaco Coalition has been dealing with this issue of fracking in the Eastern Agency and around Chaco Canyon. They've been trying to deal with this. They just recently put together a paper on the cumulative impacts and how to address this. There are many groups on the reservation that have been talking about the environmental justice issues that their communities are facing from Navajo oil and gas and from the council making decisions to go ahead and frack without really dealing with cumulative impacts in their community. And the law is very clear that agencies are charged according to federal EPA of limiting the disparate impacts of environmental harms on overburdened communities and vulnerable populations. They are supposed to, by law, reduce the cumulative environmental health impacts on these in overburdened communities and vulnerable populations. There were a lot of recommendations that were brought forward by Dine Care and Earthworks, who had put this into the legislation that they're going to approve on, are coming up for approval on April 18th. And that is in their legislation of all the prior public comments and reports that these groups have done. And they've asked for more community engagement. They've asked for environmental review and monitoring. They wanted to oversee the lease structures. They've asked to review all the well leases. They've asked for abandoned, active, and plugging wells and what is going on with those, and how monitoring in real time and sample collecting, how you need to get baselines first before you go into these communities and start drilling. There's a lot of jurisdictional requirements for drinking water and water resources that have not been met according to the EA. And they need to know what the legal recourses are and what their jurisdiction is, and have real meaningful community engagement that actually addresses the concerns that the people have put forward. And they have to improve their access to information. And people need to have a better capacity to deal with all that information as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Elouise.
Elouise?
Is she on yet?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Great. Welcome, El. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Jim and Elaine. Just for your information, I'm from that location that Elaine's talking about. It's called TSS S community. But they some people call it Sonosti. And on the north side, from central, or I guess it would be kind of like a headquarters, about 3 miles north is where the extraction is going to start, or they want to start. And Navajo Oil and Gas is the entity that wants to do that. And they are trying to push for a permit to start surveying the area. But before the permit was even approved by the Navajo Nation Council, they started the surveying. They have stakes there with numbers and names and stuff like that of the location. So we know they're actually there. That's how the local people that live there found out and wanted to know what was going on, and they had called me for help, and so that's how I got involved. And then on the south side, about the same distance, maybe 3-5 miles south, is called the Porcupine area. We never really had an English name for it, but we have a Navajo name for it, and this entity or whoever came up with this Porcupine location is where I, move up with my family during summer camp. So those are the two main locations, and then there's a lot of other locations further south and further north along the Chusca Mountains. And my main goal for getting involved with this is just to stop the helium extraction, stop hurting Mother Earth, and no destruction to Mother Earth. That's the bottom line. And then after that, we have the, we don't want our water contaminated. We don't want the people to be, we don't want their health at risk with the, all the destruction that's going to happen in the communities of TSS. And then there's other communities that are involved that should be coming out to work with us, and some of them are, and we still need more. So we have one person from, actually two people from the north side, Tommy Nakai and his mother are really out there with us. And we wish that more people will come out and say, yes, they're saying it in the background, but they're not coming forth to say that they're opposing the helium extraction. And I know if we work as a team, if we unite as one, we definitely will you know, be able to accomplish this mission of stopping the helium extraction. I believe that, and I know we will. But if there's separation and people are just in the background saying, yes, I do oppose it and not come out, then that's a different story.
So Elle, what is the response to the request for an environmental impact study? You know, has there been a response to that request yet?
I know there's no response, but I can tell you that when we first found out, we took it to our local chapter representatives that we vote in, and they're pro helium. So they're just actually telling us that we brought a resolution forth to oppose this, and also to rescind resolutions that have been approved in the past by just a few people. And I'm not making COVID as an excuse, but during that time and prior to that, there was just a few people showing up for the meetings, and it's an online meeting where it's very easy to shut off someone. And so the representatives told us that, well, how come you guys don't want money? Because Navajo Nation, Navajo Oil and Gas stated that they were going to give our local community $1.7 million. And I personally asked them myself. Mr. McClure, who's the CEO of Navajo Oil and Gas, stated that we will give you $1.7 million to the local community. And I asked him how often, and he said, I don't know. He said, probably for the lifetime of the project. And I said, well, what is the lifespan of the project? And he didn't know. So, and he just told us that, well, I'm very transparent, and all you have to do is trust me because I'm a very trustworthy person. And I told him, I said, well, how can we trust you if you don't know these answers? So that's where things are at the local level. And then later on, we brought back the resolution and they just tabled it. And so we're not getting anywhere with the local leaders at our chapter. So, and then we meet with the Department of Justice and other departments. Let me back up a little bit. We did a protest march, and on January 27, the Navajo Nation Council had that the legislation. It's legislation 0232-21, and that's where Navajo Oil and Gas is trying to have that legislation sponsored by the Speaker of the Navajo Nation Council, who is Seth Damon. And Seth Damon is one of the shareholders to Navajo Oil and Gas. So go figure. And then there's other council delegates who are also the shareholders, which is Charlene So, Otto So, I can't remember the name of the other two. But anyway, Elmer Begay is one, and I forgot who the other one was. So at the legislation, we were locked out from the council chambers and we were not allowed to go in, but we stayed outside, and we did a live show that day. The video is out and about somewhere on social media. And so at that time, Navajo Nation Council delegates told the Navajo Oil and Gas and also Seth Damon that they asked him, where is the agreement that you have between Sanasti chapter community and Navajo Oil and Gas? Because they were looking through the legislation, they couldn't find it. So they said, well, we were thinking of putting it in. And so thinking about it and all, actually physically having the agreement in the legislation is two different things.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why the Navajo Nation Council tabled that legislation, and up until spring session, which is starting on April 18. And so our plan is to do another protest march on April 18. We're going to gather at 8:30 and start marching at 9. And then at 11 o'clock, we should be in front of the Navajo Nation Council chambers to do a press conference. So that's the plan for now. And we still don't see that agreement within the legislation, unless if they have it and they're going to put it in the last minute. Or I truly think that I believe that they cannot do that because it's not allowed. They're not allowed to, any entity from the outside or any entity is not allowed to give money to the local chapters alone.
Really?
If they're going to do that, it has to go to the council. From the council, they distribute the funds to all the 110 chapters, not just one. So just thinking that that's, I believe that that's not going to happen. So if that's not going to happen, let's hope that their legislation dies.
So it sounds like the council at this point is not a very trustworthy space
Mm.
either.
No,
And-
nobody's trustworthy.
And that's going to mean that we have to work outside of the council and outside of that authority in order to even be heard at this point. And if any
Yes.
money went to the council, you'd never see it.
Yes. And
That's-
I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
No,
but
that's all right.
I think that we really need to do something about the shareholders.
Well, that was going to be my next question is, have you begun to put together a list of who these shareholders are?
We do have a list, but currently we don't have anything going yet.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is because if we can get a list of these shareholders, we'd like to begin to shine the light of day on who they are, and underscore, you know, their motives behind this. You know, it's all about profit for them, and
Yes.
you know the you know, and the health, the welfare, you know, of Mother Earth and the Navajo people be damned. They don't care about that. All they want
Yes.
is to make some money, and
Yes.
you know, and so we need to put them on the spot here, and so over the next week or so, if I could get a copy of those on our next show, I'd like to just continue this discussion and make an issue of that. Let's call them out, and
Correct.
let's see if we can get people to begin to.
So here's the list here. We put together the list
Good.
for the Navajo, and we did a little flyer here because we put Beautiful Mountain there where they want to destroy all this, the heart of the Navajo Nation.
Right.
This is a very sacred area. So the list of the shareholders are Seth Damon, Elmer Begay, Herman Daniels, Charlene So, Otto So. So these 5 people are on the council. I don't know how many are on the council, Elouise.
These are the ones that are all on the council, and Seth Damon is the speaker of the Navajo Nation Council, and he's the sponsor of this legislation, which just really irritates me to
I'll send you that list. Excuse me.
Good. That's
yeah,
self-dealing. That's self-dealing.
yes,
That's what this is. You know, it's like, you know, trying to get Clarence Thomas to recuse himself from, you know, any issues related to the January 6th thing because of his crazy wife. So here you've got members of the Navajo Council who are voting, you know, their best financial interests, you know, on something that they shouldn't even be voting on.
exactly.
So yeah, so let's get that information, and I want to keep this going. I want to keep this discussion going. Yeah, I'll get that list. I'm going to publish it, and then what we need to do is get as many environmental justice organizations around New Mexico in particular. Let's start a campaign, and you know, let's shine the light on these culprits, and demand that at the very least they recuse themselves from any voting, you know, on this matter on April 18th, because this is pretty critical stuff, and it has an implication for long-term devastation, you know, on the land and on the people if it goes forward like this. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like helium extraction, you know, is just a front. It's just a front.
Yes. Well, I have so much to share with you, but I don't think we have enough time. But just real quickly, I just want to let you know that on the west side of the area we're talking about, years ago, there used to be uranium mining. and trucks used to come down that road through the community with dust all over. And we were little kids at the time and didn't know that that was uranium. And also
Wow.
a lot of the people there have worked in the uranium and were exposed to radiation, and that had taken a lot of lives of the people. And so helium is from decayed uranium. So I'm thinking, so how stupid could an individual be to say, yes, go ahead and extract helium when unless if they don't know that helium is coming from uranium, decayed uranium. So
Sure.
why would you want to expose people in the community to uranium again when you know that a lot of people have already passed from that? And I know that's what happened because my dad's one of them that passed from being exposed to radiation.
So I have a question for you because we're out of time. But can I invite both of you back same time next week? And let's
Sure.
continue this discussion. Elaine, are you available next week, same time?
Yes, I am.
So-
I'm available after 11:30.
Okay, we'll work out a time that's mutually convenient for you. But I want to continue this discussion. This is pretty powerful stuff, and you know we've got to do something. In the meantime, let's gather as much information as possible, and let's make certain that all the environmental action groups around the state are signed on to this as well. I think that that's something we can begin to do right away. You know, and the bottom line is, and I'm gonna take a page from your flyer, Elaine. We just want people to say Dooda. Plain
That's
and
right.
simple. Plain and simple.
Dooda, no helium,
Okay,
no oil
no-
and gas,
no helium,
no
no oil and gas.
permits.
That's right. Okay. Elaine
Okay.
Cimino, L. Brown, thank you so much. And we're gonna see you next week, okay?
Very
Great.
good.
We'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to Good News News. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi, and I'm Gugu for Good News. The goal of this segment is to inspire and uplift you, the viewer, with nothing but good news. Our first story is a pay it forward story. And the question is, how can a nosy neighbor be of help? Let's take a look.
She potentially saved our lives.
The she Sarah Ward is talking about is Jacqueline Dyer. One night recently, Jacqueline happened to be next door to the Ward's home in El Reno. About midnight, Jacqueline smelled smoke. She went outside to investigate. The smoke was coming from the Ward's heating and air conditioning unit. Fearing it could lead to a house fire, Jacqueline began pounding on the Ward's front door. When Sarah's husband answered, she began tapping on her nose. You see, Jacqueline is deaf.
When she's tapping her nose, what does that mean?
She smelt the wires burning on the unit.
It was so strong that she could smell it in the house next door. Got the fire extinguisher and put it out.
I was an emotional wreck the whole next day thinking about how bad it could have went, my children being in the house, us not having smoke alarms in the house or a fire extinguisher. So I was definitely tearing up all day long and trying to learn as much sign language as I could to properly thank her for saving us.
Jacqueline not only knows sign language, but is able to read lips. Jackie.
Yeah.
I'm Kevin Ogle.
Oh.
I'm from Channel 4. We have a program called Pay It Forward, where somebody who's done something great gets rewarded for it, and Sarah has something for you.
Thank you again for saving my family. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm overwhelmed right now. I was not sure how I was going to be able to repay her for what she did, and it's just such a big thing. Thank you for helping me pay it forward to her.
And doubly happy, the $400 is coming just in time for Jacqueline.
She's going to use it to pay her rent. She's trying to save money so her son can be home. His birthday is tomorrow. Oh my gosh! Yes!
How old? Wow.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
A group hug for a lifesaver that paid it forward by sensing a neighbor in need.
Wow, isn't that good news?
We're back with That Saturday Show. And sitting next to me is a familiar face, and that is one of our local residents, Cliff Denier. And Cliff is an artist extraordinaire who brought his work here to the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice last year. He's had 2 shows here now. He's got a show up right now, which I invite you to come and see. His work is absolutely magnificent. And this time around, instead of focusing so much on his art in this interview, we want to give Cliff a chance to tell his extraordinary story about how he came to Albuquerque, the struggles, the survival, and overcoming all of that, and what brought him to this wonderful, wonderful world of artistry and creation. Cliff, welcome back.
Thank you, Jim. I
All right.
greatly appreciate it.
So, you came to Albuquerque or the New Mexico area when?
1986, actually.
1986.
It was just about a week before my 30th birthday.
Wow.
And so if you do a quick calculation, I've been here about 34 years.
Okay.
Since I came to New Mexico, I've never left New Mexico. I've lived in different cities, but I've always been in New Mexico for those years. Now, after I got my divorce, I went through some turmoil, and I was a little bit lost for a couple of years, and I finally decided I needed to make a fairly big change to bring myself back to some semblance of spiritual balance. So I'd been to Albuquerque a couple times before, and I decided this is where I needed to go.
Great.
And I needed to live in those Sandia Mountains by myself and become steeped in nature. Well, when I went there, I came here, and I bought a one-way ticket to Albuquerque. So that was it. And I made a firm commitment, and it was often cold. I was often hungry, but I did it for 5 months. I did it in the fall and winter of 1986-87. The day that I first came, it was raining, and overnight it turned to snow. And this so happened to be, I believe, the second weekend of the balloon fiesta. So that was snowed out that particular day.
Yeah.
So when I took refuge in a porta potty overnight because of the rain, and I didn't have enough money. I had 60 cents in my pocket. I didn't have enough money to get a hotel room. And this was sort of my goal, though, is to say, okay, how do we survive? What do we need to do? Water? Well, the primary thing you need is nice, fresh, clean air. And this is one of the reasons I went up into the mountains. You notice a tremendous difference in the air quality between being downtown in Albuquerque and being up in the Sandia Mountains.
Oh, yeah.
And the second thing with reference to that is I kept having to go higher and higher into the mountains to escape the I-40 traffic because it was so loud and it disturbed my peace. So I met a man that helped me quite a bit, and he said, well, here's what we need to do, Cliff. We need to go downtown and donate plasma so we have a little bit of money. And this ended up working quite well. Now, during this time when I was I was what I thought was like this spiritual question journey. But for all intents and purposes, I was homeless. And it was important for me to survive on my own without a nice shelter, you know. So the hardest thing was rain. Snow wasn't so bad, but if it was raining, once you got wet, boy, you got pretty darn cold.
Yeah.
And I recall one night I was a couple interesting experiences. It had started raining, and I started getting wet. I walked down to the Waffle House, the 24-hour Waffle House.
Right.
I was at Tramway and Central, for those of you that know that general area. And I walked in there, sat down with my wet poncho on, and the woman that was working as a server there, of course, she knew immediately that I was homeless. And she came up to me and said, we have some chili back here. We're gonna have to dump out. Would you like to have a bowl of chili? And I'll tell you what, that was the best bowl of chili I think I've ever had, was that bowl of chili.
Yeah.
And it's my belief that people want to be kind and generous, but they don't want to feel like they've been taken advantage of.
That's right.
So a lot of people are reluctant to hand out money because, oh, this is a drunk. He's just going to spend the money on alcohol or drugs or whatever. It's my opinion when you give someone money, it's their prerogative to use that money forever, whatever purpose.
That's right.
Now, obviously, you would hope, and I know because I am, to put it bluntly, I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink because I do not responsibly drink. So that was, and then another instance, and I'll just stop after this instance. I was lying in my on my rock with my covers over me, and I could smell something, and I knew immediately it was a skunk. This little guy crawled underneath my blankets, and he went like this on my finger.
Wow.
He just kind of, he or she, just kind of tested it.
It's amazing.
But if that guy had broken the skin, or I jumped all up and he sprayed me with his, I would have had to get rabies shots.
Sure.
So there's something to be said for not violently or quickly reacting when you're in moments of stress. And my father and mother had a huge influence on me in relating to myself and to other people. In one of my places, my father worked for a pharmaceutical company, and we were moved every couple of years. So we were in Chicago for maybe 3 years. And this was when I was in about, third grade, fourth grade. And I can still remember interacting with the different, it was, as you know, Chicago is more of a racially diverse city.
Yeah, it is.
And my best friend was this tall, lanky black woman, black girl, little black girl. And it really helped me to realize the value of the individual and the person. And you don't judge that person by their skin color.
That's right.
I was so fortunate as a youngster to go through that experience.
It helps shape things.
It helps shape things.
Yeah.
And now all my art and my writing, my photography. I bring all my experiences to that particular project. And that's one of my goals, is to continuously evolve. This art, by and large, is different from last art show.
Yeah.
So I'll undergo a further evolution. Maybe I'll be, the Peace and Justice Center will be nice enough to allow me to have another show.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I feel blessed,
Yeah.
Jim. I just feel blessed. Yeah.
We're fortunate to have you here, though, Cliff. And when Eliza Schmidt, our curator, first brought you to our attention, the reaction was, well, we've never seen his work before. Let's see what he's got. And you have just taken us by storm. So tell us a little bit about what moves you in the direction of creating art, such beautiful art as we've seen.
Yes. Well, if we use one example of my current style, I got to thinking about paint. I got to thinking about the surface. I got to be thinking about what to do with that paint, what to do with that paint once it's on the surface. Obviously, you can paint, you can use a brush, you can use any implement, a palette knife, anything. But I looked at that for a bit, and I started putting many drops of paint on that canvas. I said, well, now what am I going to do? So I began to use gravity to meld those, have those colors intermix without attempting to represent anything. It's just the paint on the canvas and what I do with gravity. And so it's over half probably works are done like that. Some of them are done in more of a dynamic brushstroke manner. And I've already been thinking and working on new art.
Wonderful.
That'll probably, I gotta, it fulfills me as a person, just as the writing does. And I am not a person that can just sit down and go, oh, I think I'll sit here for 3 hours and watch something on YouTube.
Right.
I last about 15 minutes and then I say, okay. And I've been this way my whole life. I'm always this person, I lack patience. If something doesn't interest me, or I get the general message of what this person is trying to say, I go, okay, got it. Let's move on to something else.
So here's a question for you as we wrap up this interview, and I want to just kind of put you on the spot here.
Sure.
Does your history and your experiences coming to Albuquerque and struggling through the mountains and homelessness and all of that, does that experience influence how you express yourself today artistically?
That's a very good question, Jim. Let me say this. Once you are homeless, it stays with you the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah.
And I look at my apartment and all this stuff I have around me, and I go, this is nice, but essentially it's meaningless. Because what if you had a fire? What if you're in an earthquake? What if you're in a tsunami? What if some weather event totally destroyed everything you own, and you just had yourself and your family safe? It's in an instant, things can change. So I never panhandled for money, but a couple times people would just give me money. I remember I'll wrap it up then after this interesting experience. I was going to get cans out of the out of the garbage. And this man came out of an apartment and he was crying. And his family was looking through the drapes in the hotel, right? He hands me a $20 bill.
Wow.
And that happened twice actually in my stay. And that was, of course, I felt really good about that. But I also reflected on this particular man, how much he must have really been hurting. And he had something happen in his past that influenced him to give me some money. He just handed me the $20 and then he walked back into the apartment.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
the hotel.
That's amazing, Cliff. That is. We've been talking with Cliff Denier, artist extraordinaire, and I have to editorialize by saying a real treasure of the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice.
Jim.
He's brought such joy and such color and creativity to the center. And we just look forward to much more of Cliff Denier and his work. Thank you for being on that Saturday show.
Thank you, Jim.
And telling your story. We
Thanks for the
appreciate
center, the Peace and Justice Center, for being open for me to have a spot to display my work, and people can look at it at a larger audience.
you. And that will never change, Cliff. We
All right,
appreciate
Jim.
you. All right.
Wonderful.
All right. Back to the studio.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.